Hi, so in this module, we're going to go through several different examples of the 4 triggers, how they all work together to create the experiences of our lives, the emotional experiences, also the mistakes that we make. And you'll see again how all things in our life that create this discomfort really do kind of deconstruct down to these 4 things. So these are the things that we can identify in our life. These are the things that we can be watchful of in our life and be able to help to keep us aware of what's happening. Now, as we go through this exercise, I'm going to give you the opportunity to pause the video and move through the workbook to see how do you think these things can deconstruct down to these 4. Feel free to do it along with me or try to see how you would interpret these before I go into it. Whether or not you do it at the first 1 or 2 or whatever, I would encourage you at some point not to watch my explanation before you try to see how these things would apply. This will help you to start to get that muscle memory of practicing this in your own life and being able to begin to identify how these experiences might deconstruct down to the 4 triggers. So I also want to mention here that this is something that's going to take a lot of practice over time. Don't feel like you have to be in a rush to get it right today. Don't feel like you have to get in a rush to get it right tomorrow. Just make sure to keep doing the work and keep doing the practice. The more you do this practice, the easier it will become. Now, in addition to it requiring practice, I also have to say here that it's really important to involve your higher power in this process, because this really is kind of a process of revelation. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. As I was first learning this technique, it was not something that came naturally to me. It was clunky and weird. Nobody explained this to me, by the way, with it being the 4 triggers. Nobody explained to me how these are the 4 things that you're identifying and you're going to live by this, and this is what you need to identify in your life. I was told to look out for those things, and it was important to recognize them. And there were other resources and tools I was given that made it apparent that it was important to recognize those things in my life, for sure. But I didn't understand that that's the whole thing, like that was the core of what my addiction was, and that was going to be the core of what my addiction recovery looked like. The core of my addiction was those 4 things wreaking havoc in my life, and the solution to my addiction was unraveling those 4 things from wreaking havoc in my life and staying more in alignment with those 2 great commandments, right? Going back to that. So what I need you to understand is that this is something that will take practice, and the more you practice it in faith with your higher power, the more fulfilling this experience will be. So I can't tell you how many times I have looked at things in my life and I'm like, I don't know where I'm being selfish. I don't know where I am being afraid or whatever it was, until I sat quietly and I asked, where am I being selfish? For me, that's always a 2-way prayer, always, always. In fact, for a very long time, as I moved through addiction recovery in a 12-step program, as I moved through that process, I worked with a sponsor for 18 months. Not the same one. I ended up working with 4 over a period of time. But one of the things that I had to do every day was to answer a series of questions to a sponsor every single day. And as I went through those questions, I realized very quickly there was no value. There really was not a lot of value in answering those questions and texting them off to my sponsor every day. The magic happened when I paused and made it a 2-way prayer. So I didn't look at it as an answer to a question that I was sending to my sponsor. I looked at it as a question I was asking God and waiting for the answer. So for instance, in the course of this video, what we talked about, these 4 triggers, that was the highest thing on the list, was sitting and asking God, where was I fearful today? Where was I resentful today? Where was I selfish today? Where was I dishonest? And I would sit and I would wait for the answer to come, and it would come so fast. And it would be the things that surprised. I was surprised by the answers that came. There were so many times when there were things that happened through the course of the day that I'm like, oh, that was annoying. Oh, that was no big deal. Or, oh, that was like a little uncomfortable. But then when I would sit later and have that time where I was like, God, like, where was I afraid today? Wow, those things would come back to my mind in full color, and God would be pointing things out to me and being like, that was not just annoying, that terrified you. You're a little more dysregulated than you realize, Gwen. That's probably why you ate 5 cookies at lunch, remember? And so those kinds of conversations were ones that God and I had a lot in the beginning. And so as you move through this, just make sure to be keeping this an open practice with God, because he will help direct this practice for you in a way that is going to make it super productive and super helpful to you. And then also the other thing I want to point out here is that as you move through this process, never at any time am I trying to invalidate your emotions, or am I asking you to invalidate your emotions. All of the emotions that you identify in your life, they're there for a reason. So when you ask, where was I fearful today? The fears that will come up are real. When you ask, where were you resentful? The resentments that come up, those are real. And you're resentful for a reason. You're fearful for a reason. All of these things, you're under the influence of selfishness and dishonesty. All of the ways that we get influenced by these 4 triggers, they happen for a reason. So this process is not in any way an attempt to invalidate your emotional experiences. This process is simply to help you be more aware of your emotional experiences and what they are. And so you can recognize the threat that is being levied against you. The threat being those 4 triggers. Because anytime we are under the influence of fear, we're going to make decisions from that place. When we're under the influence of any of the triggers, fear, resentment, selfishness, dishonesty, when we are under their influence, we are making decisions that are compromised. Do you understand what I'm saying? We're making decisions for our life that are compromised when we're coming from a place of those 4 triggers. So even though those emotions might be valid, the sooner we can clear them out and neutralize them, the better position we'll be in to make better choices for our life and to keep moving back towards those other 2 great commandments. The part where we are trying to love God and trying to love other people, if for no other reason, because that's what's going to guarantee us the greatest peace and the greatest outcomes in our life. Okay, so that's important to mention. And the other thing I want to point out here is that this is going to be a practice of self-awareness. Now, ideally, this is something that you'll get in the habit of doing as you are emotionally dysregulated. As you start to find yourself in traffic and getting really hot over it, you're like, oh, okay, what's happening? Where am I afraid? Where am I resentful? Where am I blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that might not happen right now in the beginning. Right now, you might be a little bit too consumed by the fact that you're in your car and you're driving and you're in a hurry and you got to get somewhere and you don't care about those 4 things. You don't care about this course. You don't care about anything except you got to get where you got to go. I get it. I totally get it. But I want you to know that the faster you can start to apply this principle in real time, the faster it will start to work for you. Now, if at no other time during your day, I would encourage you please to make this a practice, which is to increase your self-awareness on purpose in the morning and also at night. Now, if you skip the morning and you don't even think about it till lunchtime, well, then make it at lunchtime. Make it 5 o'clock, maybe 6 o'clock. This isn't a date you're going to miss with yourself. If you don't take the time to increase your self-awareness in the morning, do it when you think about it. But try to keep that date with yourself at night so that if you miss the one in the morning, well, at least you have this one to catch you at night, or vice versa, whatever it is. Try to do it. Do it when you think of it, but aim for morning and night. So your awareness in the morning would look like waking up and looking at the day ahead, and just reminding yourself that you're gonna get triggered because you're a human being, not because you're an addict, not because you're a bad person, because you are human and you will have biological responses to the stimulus in your life. If somebody comes into your life and screams at you, you will probably resent it. You will probably feel fearful or whatever it is. That is very normal. But you'll also recognize that, okay, you start your day and you're like, I'm going to be affected by these 4 triggers today, for sure, because I'm human, surrounded by humans. It's going to happen. And just remember and keep it close that, okay, it's going to be those 4 things. It's me versus the 4 things. It's not me versus all of these things I don't have control over. So I just have to bring it back to that. Now, whether or not you remember to bring it back to those things in the moment or not, that might take time and continued practice. But give yourself that grace, give the world that grace and mercy to know that the thing that is causing you the most discomfort are the 4 triggers that are going to move through your life by virtue of you being a human being. Okay? Now, at night, give yourself that opportunity to come back around and review the things that have happened since you opened your day with that acknowledgement and be like, okay, well then, where was I angry today? Where was I fearful? You'll see in your workbook that I have some daily journal pages for you that are already kind of prepped for that. Feel free to print off as many as you want. I've only given you one in the workbook, but like I said, feel free to print them off if you want to do one every day, because this will be a great practice for you just to go through. But again, I'm not asking you to record your thoughts. I'm not asking you to record what you recall. This journal is intended for it to be this journal page, this daily journaling page. This should be a two-way prayer. So when you go through these experiences at night, when you take the time to do that, make sure to pause and ask your higher power, where was I fearful today? And wait until you have something come to your mind, and then write that down. And that will help you to practice that self-awareness. And over time, it will just become second nature to you. And faster and faster and faster, you'll see in real time how those things are affecting you. And what's cool about that is the more aware of it that you become, the faster you'll identify it and the less affected you'll be by things. Now, I'm going to give you an example in one of these coming up videos in this section. I'm going to give you the example so you can see how one would be affected by fear and all of those things. But it also is something that actually happened to me, but didn't cause fear. It didn't cause resentment. It didn't cause any of those things because I had already been doing this for a really long time. So when I was in that experience, I wasn't fazed by it at all. I was just in problem-solving mode, taking care of business, because I already knew, yeah, if I'm under the influence of fear and I can't make the decisions I need to in order for the best outcomes. So I have learned to live my life in a way where I'm not constantly being burdened by them because I know they don't serve me. Not to say I'm never affected by them. I certainly am, because I'm still a human being surrounded by human beings. So so let's get into it. You'll see after this I have 5 examples I'm going to give you. You'll see in the workbook also a few other things that I have written down and share with you for your consideration, because some of the things, I'm giving you specific examples. Some of them will apply to your life. Some of them won't apply to your life. I've tried to use examples that will be similar to something that you've experienced, but I know, it's not going to be universally true for all of us. So in the workbook, you'll see places where I have invited you to deconstruct some things in your life to see how they are affected by how they're under the influence of those 4 triggers. And I also want to point out here that some big things like addiction, they are not, okay, so they do come down to the 4 triggers. Everything does, right? Everything deconstructs back down to those things. However, in the beginning of this, of course, I was explaining to you how we kind of have this happening where we have the 2 commandments. We have love God, love everybody else. I mean, that's what we're striving for. That's what addiction recovery is about, really. If we can get here, we found recovery. But that's what the process is. I mean, that's where we will arrive. That's where we're aiming. Now, if you are being affected by these 4, here's the thing. Like I showed you earlier, addiction falls somewhere in between, right? So addiction is the accumulation of a lot of the 4 triggers building up over time, where we're just, it's so uncomfortable, we need relief, really need relief now, no matter what. So some things in our life, some of the big feelings, some of the big mistakes are going to fall into that same kind of a camp, where it's the accumulation of those things over time. So then we have to unravel the accumulation, sometimes bit by bit by bit, experience by experience by experience. So again, just how addiction would be the result of a lot of accumulation of that over time. Another example, something like that would be like if somebody were to cheat on their spouse. If somebody were to cheat on their spouse, that definitely is going to come back to the 4 triggers, but also it's not going to be so easy to tie it back into here the way the 4 triggers are affected, because cheating on your spouse, that is a buildup and an accumulation of the 4 triggers and choices over a period of time until the scale tips and someone has been cheated on now. So for me, also another experience in my life that was the result of an accumulation of those things. I had crippling anxiety. I struggled with anxiety. I struggled with depression. Now, I'm not saying this is the case for everybody who does. I know there are chemical imbalances and those kinds of things. So I am not in any way speaking to that. I am only saying that in my experience, the anxiety that ruled my life, the depression that affected my life, it was the result of an accumulation of fear, resentment, selfishness, and dishonesty. Definitely that selfishness. I'm sorry, not the selfishness. Definitely the fear. And I will actually use that example in the following videos. But I just want to point out that some of these things will be a reflection of the accumulation of these things. So I've given you 5 examples to give you some practice, but then you'll see in the workbook a few more things and a few more things just to keep in mind as you strive to apply these things in your life. So thank you so much, and I look forward to giving you the examples. Stay tuned.